Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Naga Monchetti and John Kay.
Our headlines today. Decision time for Boris Johnson. He says the UK is seeing a second wave of coronavirus cases and considers if nationwide lockdown restrictions are needed across the whole of England.
Early closing in Newcastle and the North East as a nighttime curfew for bars and restaurants comes into effect.
I don't think it's going to make any difference. The virus doesn't die at 10 o'clock.
It's good because it's saving people's lives, bad because it's infecting one night out.
The pioneering US Supreme Court judge and champion of women's rights, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, has died, provoking an immediate political row about her replacement.
Good morning. It's a case of when, not if, Gareth Bale's return to Spurs is confirmed. Tottenham fans are waiting with bated breath for the loan deal to be done and for news on when he might make his second debut after reports that an injury could delay that slightly by up to a month.
Good morning. Despite a chilly start, a little bit of mist around, it is promising to be a dry and fine weekend for most of us. A little bit windy in the south, but how long will it last? I'll have more detail for you in around quarter of an hour.
Good morning. It's Saturday the 19th of September. Our top story is that the Prime Minister is holding urgent talks this weekend to decide whether to impose lockdown restrictions on the whole of England to tackle the current surge in coronavirus cases.
Yes, Boris Johnson says the UK is now seeing a second wave, with the number of new infections doubling every week and hospital admissions also on the rise. Simon Jones has the latest for us.
Closing time came early last night in Newcastle. A 10 p.m. finish, part of new restrictions for much of the North East, which also see people from different households banned from socialising at home.
If that's law, it's law. But if people would behave themselves, it wouldn't be like this.
I just think people are going to go out during the day now instead of going out at night, so it's not going to really change anything. It's good because it's saving people's lives, bad because it's infecting one night out.
A slow night and an early finish too for this fast food business.
I don't think it's going to make any difference. The virus doesn't die at 10 o'clock.
But with infection rates rising, more than 13 million people in the UK are now facing lockdown measures.
Please take a seat and I'll be with you in a moment.
Life is starting to look different, with new test centres opening up in places like Glasgow. New restrictions come in next week in Merseyside, parts of the Midlands and West Yorkshire. And in Lancashire, like here in Accrington, though Blackpool is exempt due to lower infection rates. The latest government figures show the highest daily number of new cases since the current surge began, with more than 4,300 in the last 24-hour period. That means the average number reported per day in the past week is 3,466. Yesterday, the Prime Minister met scientists trying to develop a vaccine.
That's fantastic. That's like Jurassic Park.
Today, he'll be in Downing Street, where he'll consider stopping people who don't live together meeting and making all bars and restaurants in England close at 10 p.m.
We are now seeing a second wave coming in, and I don't think anybody wants to go into a second lockdown. But clearly, when you look at what is happening, you've got to wonder whether we need to go further.
Here in London, this is the first weekend that the so-called rule of 6 has been in place, limiting the number of people who can gather in groups. The government will be looking very closely at the effect that has on coronavirus rates. But the Mayor of London says it's increasingly likely that further restrictions will be needed here too. And he says the government shouldn't wait until the virus spirals out of control. Boris Johnson is desperate to avoid a second full national lockdown, but he knows that the time for tough decisions is fast approaching. Simon Jones, BBC News.
Let's talk to our political correspondent, Jonathan Blake, now. Jonathan, morning to you. So, national lockdown across England, that's one of the options. Discussions taking place this weekend.
Yes, Naga, and I think it's clear from what the Prime Minister has said is that at all costs the government wants to avoid a return to the severity of the restrictions we saw during the darkest days of lockdown, if you like, earlier this year. It's likely that schools will remain open and most workplaces will remain open as well. It is also clear, though, that the government believes restrictions on a national level are now needed to a greater degree than the rule of 6, which has been in place for a few few weeks. So at Westminster and in the devolved governments around the UK, discussions are underway about what to do and when. One option is this so-called circuit break, a time-limited approach where tighter restrictions could be in place. For example, the earlier closing of bars and restaurants and a ban on households meeting for a temporary period. The idea being there to slow the spread of the virus before it gets out of control and too many people are admitted to hospital and sadly many more people die. And there is also the option of a three-tier approach which could see different levels of restrictions imposed at different times according to the number of cases. No easy decisions. The factors at play here, of course, the number of coronavirus cases and the number of resulting deaths, but also the impact of these decisions on the economy and people's health and well-being in general.
Jonathan, thanks very much for taking us through that. Jonathan Blake there.
Well, the Irish government has tightened restrictions in Dublin due to the rising number of coronavirus cases there. The measures, which came into force at midnight, include asking residents to stay within their own areas, banning social gatherings and restricting restaurants to outdoor-only dining.
The Foreign Secretary's bodyguard has been removed from operational duties after he left his gun on a plane yesterday morning. The officer had been accompanying Dominic Raab, who was flying back to the UK after an official visit to the United States. The Metropolitan Police says it's taking the matter extremely seriously and an internal investigation is already underway.
The US Supreme Court Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg, an iconic champion of women's rights, has died at the age of 87. She was the oldest justice and the second ever woman to sit on the Supreme Court. President Trump and his Democratic rival Joe Biden are among those who've paid tribute to her.
She led an amazing life. What else can you say? She was an amazing woman. Whether you agreed or not, she was an amazing woman who led an amazing life. I'm actually sad to hear that.
She practiced the highest American ideals as a justice, equality and justice under the law. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg stood for all of us. As I said, she was a beloved figure.
Her death has already prompted a political row over who will replace her. Democrats are worried it could pave the way for Donald Trump to expand his Conservative majority on the Supreme Court. The BBC's Catty Kay explains from Washington.
Everything is up for grabs if the Republicans take control of the Supreme Court, 6 Republicans to 3 Democrats. Abortion rights are up for grabs. Gay rights are up for grabs. Race equality in the country is up for grabs. Voting rights are up for grabs. They really feel this is a moment where they could be losing a huge amount of power and where America could be about to become a much more conservative country for years to come, whoever is elected in November.
That's Catty Kay with the latest from Washington. It's 8 minutes past 8 Saturday morning, and I think we should just stand back and sort of get our heads around all these changes and variations in the lockdown rules.
Yeah, more than 4 million people are going to face tougher lockdown rules from next week. This is because we've seen a significant rise in coronavirus cases.
Yeah, it means that in total, around 13 million people will be under lockdown, local restrictions in the UK. That's about 1 in 5 of the population. New measures are going to come into effect on Tuesday for people living in parts of the northwest, the Midlands and West Yorkshire. They will affect 4.7 million people and include a ban on different households mixing in homes and in gardens. Almost 2 million people in parts of the northeast are already unable to meet other households, and pub curfews came into effect there last night after new restrictions came into force yesterday.
Let's get more from Newcastle upon Tyne with our reporter Megan Patterson. Megan, first night of bars and restaurants closing early, 10 p.m. I think was the time. How did that go down?
Well, it's the morning after the very quiet night before here in Newcastle. Definitely fewer people out and about in the city centre yesterday on into the evening. And those who were, as you say, had to leave the restaurants, the bars, the clubs by 10 o'clock. All part of measures to try and curb the spread of COVID-19 here in the north east of England. Now, many people we spoke to had started their nights out a little bit earlier yesterday to try and still enjoy themselves. People were, on the whole, resigned to these new changes as necessary. Newcastle in particular has a particularly vibrant hospitality sector. It contributes, we're told, £340 million to the economy here. So there is a concern from some businesses that these measures will hurt at a time that they're already struggling. Now, it's not just affecting people in Newcastle, as you say. 7 local authorities in the northeast of England requested that these measures be put in place. 2 million people are having to socialise differently once again this weekend. Households are being asked not to socialise with other households, either indoors or outside. They've got to stick to themselves and they've got to stick to their social bubbles. And obviously that's a very different thing, a very difficult thing to monitor. And the police here are asking people to stick by the rules, to play along with them, because if they don't, they're putting even further pressure on already stretched police services. Now, the local authority leaders here requested these measures, but they know that they are difficult and they know that people are frustrated and fed up. But they say the measures were entirely necessary as cases of coronavirus were increasing rapidly in these areas. So they're asking people to stick by the rules, and they're hopeful that they can halt that rise in cases and also avoid a full lockdown in the coming weeks.
Megan, thanks very much. Megan Patterson for us there.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.